In the beginning of May, Bond and I had a music gig at Geneva College in Beaver Falls, Beaver County. While unloading our gear, we realized we were parked beside a historical marker proclaiming that we stood at the site of the first college basketball game. We stopped, read the marker in its entirety, and took a photo before rushing the rest of our gear into the field house in order to stay ahead of the approaching rain. Admittedly, I'm not the most knowledgeable person to say much anything about basketball. I will drop anything and everything I'm doing to learn more about the whole Magic Johnson-Larry Bird rivalry, but that's a character-driven story as much as of a story of basketball. Regardless, we were going to have to do some research, as like most things, the story is a bit less cut and dry as the plaque would have you believe. So Geneva College touts itself as the birthplace of college basketball, and it does have a legitimate claim to that title. The sport's very inventor, Dr. James Naismith, I believe that's how that's pronounced, wrote in his 1941 book Basketball, Its Origin and Development that Geneva College was the site of the first collegiate basketball game played between Geneva College and New Brighton YMCA, New Brighton being a town on the opposite side of the Beaver River. This game occurred on April 8, 1893. However, intramural basketball had been played at Geneva College at least as early as February 1892, and this was only a couple months after Naismith established the game in December 1891 at the YMCA in Springfield, Massachusetts. The outcome of the Geneva College and New Brighton game was 3-0 in favor of Geneva. As I've already stated, I'm not the most knowledgeable person when the subject comes to basketball. I've always been more interested in hockey, and this score sounds much more like a hockey or soccer score, 3-0, than the outcome of a basketball game, which at times can resemble pinball in its high numbers. The game, which at the time of occurrence was sometimes referred to as basket football, required some additional gear, namely ladders, which were employed after each score, when a player would have to climb up the ladder to where the net, a repurposed peach box, was suspended in order to retrieve the ball. It truly was a basket, and the test seems like such a nuisance that I imagine that the players feigned missing the net in order not to have to bother with the ladder. That would have been my tactic at the very least. In Dr. Naismith's book, he writes, Geneva College in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and the University of Iowa both played basketball in the season of 1892. Which of these two colleges may claim the first game, I do not know. Mr. C.O. Bemis, a Springfield boy, had gone to Geneva College as physical director. Bemis had seen the game played in the training school gymnasium while he was home on a vacation. He realized that it might solve the need for a winter activity in his school. I told him of the success we had and explained to him the fundamentals of the game. On his return to Beaver Falls, he started the game in Geneva College. It is my belief, therefore, that this college was the first to play basketball. Granted, you may be inclined to think that we take a patriotic view and lean towards Geneva for Pennsylvanian supremacy, but honestly, there's an argument to be made. But the game's inventor and proselytizer believed that Geneva College was the most likely site, and that says a good bit. Now, there's an obvious argument we haven't discussed, and that is Vanderbilt's claim, which is a relatively new contender. Keep in mind that basketball, known by a variety of names early on, and Naismith ball was proposed, but Dr. James Naismith said that name would probably ruin the game. Anyhow, the game was spreading about the country in the late 1890s, and collegiate sports were nothing like what they are today. That the sport would continue to grow and evolve was not likely on the minds of many, and probably would go on to surprise a lot of people. As such, not a lot of people were basketball historians or record keepers in the 1890s. In 2008, a Vanderbilt historian would come across a local newspaper article from early February 1893. The paper, the Daily American, wrote, "The new game known as basketball, which has been recently introduced into gymnasiums throughout the United States, has gained a large following. Its advent in Nashville was marked by an enthusiastic reception. The game is very much like football, with much of the roughness eliminated, and instead of keeping the ball down, it is kept up. Tonight at 8 o'clock in the gymnasium of the Young Men's Christian Association, the public will have an opportunity of witnessing a spirited contest in basketball between teams from Vanderbilt and the association. The two teams are well trained and an exciting game will be played. The public is invited to witness the contest. Seats will be placed on the running track for ladies, who are especially urged to be present." Now, that places the Vanderbilt game roughly 2 months prior to Geneva's game, but, as mentioned earlier, Geneva College had been playing basketball amongst students since 1892. Naismith also mentions the University of Iowa. Iowa is one of the earliest schools to participate in intercollegiate play. Iowa does hold the distinction of having the first 5-man lineups, starting with a game against the University of Chicago on January 18th, 1896. Some people consider this match a more evolved, organized, and recognizable version than that played at Geneva or Vanderbilt to be the true first college basketball game. If you were curious, the University of Chicago beat Iowa 15-12, which is still a low-scoring game by current basketball standards, but not the 3-0 event that was documented in Beaver County. To recap, both Tennessee's Vanderbilt University and Pennsylvania's Geneva College were organizing college basketball games between students and YMCA members in the winter of 1893. Presently, the best-known records lean towards Vanderbilt as being the right claimant, but things are not cut and dry enough to be totally conclusive, as Beaver County papers note basketball as early as 1892. So more information may yet be revealed. Regardless, the sports inventor, Dr. James Naismith, believed Geneva to have been the most likely site and was personally acquainted with the game's organizer, Charles Bemis. Born in New England in 1867, Charles Bemis would meet James Naismith at Springfield, Massachusetts in the late 1880s. In 1889, he became the director at Geneva College, the athletic director. Just shy of 23 years of age, he was both a player and a coach for the school's baseball, football, and basketball teams. In fact, he was responsible for the creation not only of Geneva's first basketball team, and this appears to be a fact, the world's first college basketball team, but he also created the college's football team, which played only one game in its inaugural season of 1890. 2 years later, Geneva College's Board of Trustees wrote of Charles Bemis, "Strong inducements to leave us have been held out to Professor O.C. Bemis of the Department of Physical Culture. The board could ill afford to keep him, and still less could it afford to lose him. He is a master in the work of physical culture and has far greatly worth to us for the culture of the soul. Professor Bemis is a thoroughly conscientious and consistent Christian, outspoken in his opposition to dancing, card-playing, theater-going, tobacco-using, and all such degrading and demoralizing habits which are so ensnaring to students. Arrangements have been made by which he will be with us next year." Bemis' religious convictions would lead to his becoming an ordained minister in 1897. He and his wife would move to East Lansing, Michigan, where he would continue coaching football and basketball at the Michigan Agricultural College, now known as Michigan State University. He coached at the college from 1899 to 1901, after which he would move back to Pennsylvania and take up as a pastor at a Presbyterian church in McClellantown, Fayette County. In 1909, the congregation tried to oust him. Of this, he wrote, "Our greatest drawback in the church work was the presence of several exceedingly active gossips and troublemakers. After 4 years of patient endurance, the success of work demanded that the practice stop, so we were forced to suspend a sister who was addicted to the habit. She immediately gathered on her side the other troublemakers, including the church boss and a few relatives and hangers-on, both in and out of the church. A majority leaders of the presbytery secured enough votes to forcibly remove me by vote from the official pastorate of the church against the unanimous vote and the protest of the congregation upholding me. It made no difference with the work, for I went right on just the same as before under the employment of the church as their supply." A few years later, Bemis would leave the United States working with the YMCA in Russia and in France. At this point, it appears he left basketball behind, eventually returning to the Midwest in and around 1920. He would pass away in 1948. 9 years after Dr. Naismith, and 55 years after an April evening basketball game at Beaver Falls, Geneva College. Regardless of where historians determine that the first game occurred, Geneva College will be forever recognized as one of the game's earliest contributors.